found his dying neighbor's abandoned mail-order bride freezing in snow. What happened next shocked. But for John, the retired schoolteacher who lived alone at the edge of the neighborhood, the snow brought unease rather than beauty. He had always loved winter, the way it turned the world quiet and still, but tonight something felt off. He had just come in from clearing his driveway, the scrape of his shovel echoing faintly against the silent houses around him. His breath came in visible puffs, and he tugged his scarf tighter around his neck, shaking the cold from his fingers. That's when he noticed movement near his neighbor's house, the Thompson residence. Normally, the house was quiet, almost too quiet, but tonight, through the snow and the dim glow of the street lamp, he saw a shadow stumble near the edge of the yard. John squinted, trying to make out what it was. At first he thought it might be a stray animal, perhaps a dog that had wandered off, but then he saw a flash of pale skin and dark hair and his heart skipped. It wasn't an animal. It was a person, a young woman, struggling to move through the snow, her arms wrapped around herself as if to protect from the cold. Without thinking twice, John grabbed his heavy coat and stepped back into the night. He moved cautiously across the yard, mindful of the ice beneath his boots. "Hey, are you okay?" he called, his voice firm but gentle. The woman froze and looked up, her eyes wide with fear and confusion. She was barely able to stand, shivering violently, and the snow clung to her coat and hair. John's mind raced. He had heard stories about people caught in the cold, left stranded by circumstances beyond their control, but he had never expected to see it in his quiet neighborhood. He approached slowly, holding out his hands in a gesture of help. "It's okay. I won't hurt you. Let me help you inside." Then she gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. John stepped closer and offered his arm. Carefully she took it, leaning on him as he guided her through the snow and toward his house. Each step was a struggle for her, and he could feel how weak she was, how cold her body had become. Inside, the warmth hit her like a wave. John quickly led her to the living room and offered her a chair near the heater. He grabbed a thick blanket from the couch and wrapped it around her trembling shoulders. "Here, this will help," he said softly. The woman wrapped her arms around the blanket, shivering still but a little less, her lips chattering. John went to the kitchen and prepared a cup of hot tea, sweetened lightly, hoping it would warm her from the inside. When he returned, he handed it to her carefully. She took it with hands that were almost blue from cold and sipped slowly, eyes still wide, darting around the room as if trying to understand where she was. "Thank you," she whispered finally, her voice barely audible. John realized she had been through something terrible, something that had left her scared and exhausted. "What's your name?" he asked gently. "Alina," she murmured. "Alina, it's nice to meet you." "My name is John," he replied, sitting down across from her. "Do you want to tell me what happened?" The story seemed too heavy for words, too painful to put into sentences. But after a long pause, she began, her voice quiet but steadying as she spoke. She told John that she had come from far away, traveling across the world to marry a man she barely knew. She had been promised a safe home and a family, a chance to start a new life in this small town. But things had gone terribly wrong. Her husband, she explained, had fallen ill shortly after she arrived. The family she expected to welcome her instead abandoned her, leaving her alone in the house with no one to turn to. She had tried to survive on her own, but the harsh winter had made it impossible. That night, the snowstorm trapped her outside, and she had no choice but to wander, hoping someone would find her. John listened quietly, feeling a mix of anger and sorrow. How could someone be treated this way? How could a person, traveling so far with hope in her heart, be left alone and freezing in the snow? He shook his head, trying not to let the anger show too strongly. Right now, the most important thing was to keep her safe and warm. "Don't worry, Alina. You're safe now," he said softly, offering a reassuring smile. "We'll figure this out. You won't be out in the cold anymore." For the first time in hours, maybe even days, she felt a flicker of hope. As the night went on, John did what he could to make her comfortable. He brought her extra blankets, offered another cup of tea, and even found some warm clothes in his spare closet that might fit her. She changed into them slowly, still trembling, but the warmth began to seep into her body. They spoke in short bursts at first. Alina asked about the town, about John's life, and he shared stories from his years teaching in the local school. She smiled faintly at his stories, her fear slowly giving way to curiosity and cautious trust. John realized that connection, even the simplest conversation, could be as healing as warmth itself. The storm outside continued, snow piling high against the windows, the wind howling through the trees. John checked the locks on the doors and windows, making sure they were secure. He kept an eye on Alina, watching for signs of hypothermia or exhaustion. Each time she shivered, he offered another blanket or a gentle word. By the early hours of the morning, Alina was resting in the chair, wrapped in layers of blankets, sipping tea and staring quietly out the window. John sat nearby, exhausted but alert, thinking about what needed to happen next. She couldn't stay with him forever, not with the legal and social complications, but he knew he had to find a way to help her survive, to give her hope and a chance to rebuild. The first night had been harrowing, but it had also been a turning point. Alina had been found when she was at her most vulnerable, but John's quick thinking and compassion had given her a chance to survive the cold, both outside and within the fear that had gripped her. As dawn broke over the snow-covered town, painting the sky in soft pinks and oranges, John sat quietly beside Alina, watching her sleep. He thought about the unexpected way life sometimes tested people, about how the cruelest circumstances could be softened by simple human kindness. He didn't know what the future would hold for Alina, but he knew one thing for certain. She was no longer alone, and sometimes that was enough to give a person the strength to keep going. For the first time in days, Alina felt a sense of safety, a fragile but real comfort that maybe, just maybe, everything could be okay. And John, sitting in the quiet morning light, understood that a small act of courage and empathy could change a life forever. Outside, the snow continued to fall, but inside the little house, warmth, safety, and a spark of hope had taken root. And in that quiet, fragile moment, two strangers, brought together by circumstance and compassion, began the first chapter of a journey that neither could have predicted, but both would carry in their hearts forever. The morning after John found Alina in the snow, the world outside seemed quieter than usual. The snow had stopped falling, leaving everything coated in a soft, white blanket. John brewed some fresh tea and sat down at the kitchen table, watching her stir awake in the living room. She looked around cautiously, her eyes wide and alert, as if expecting danger to appear at any moment. "Good morning," John said gently, keeping his voice calm. "You slept well." Instead, he poured a cup of tea for her and placed it carefully on the table. Slowly, she sipped, the warmth bringing some color back to her pale cheeks. After a while, she finally spoke. I don't know what to do," she said, her voice soft and shaky. "I have nowhere to go, no one to call. I feel like I'm trapped." "I know," he replied. "And it's not your fault. You didn't do anything wrong. Right now, the important thing is that you're safe. We'll figure out the rest together. You're not alone anymore." She explained that she had come from a distant country, full of hope and dreams of starting a new life. She had answered a letter from a man named Mr. Thompson, a man who seemed kind on paper. The plan had been simple: marry, live together, and build a family. But reality had been cruel. Soon after arriving, Mr. Thompson became ill, weak, and unable to care for himself. His family, instead of helping, abandoned her completely. She was left alone in a strange country without money, friends, or anyone to turn to. And when the winter storm came, she had nowhere to hide, no one to trust until John found her. As she spoke, John listened quietly, nodding occasionally. He didn't interrupt or judge. He knew that sometimes the most important thing was to let someone tell their story, to let them release the fear and pain trapped inside. When Alina finished, John took a deep breath. "That was a lot to go through," he said softly. I can't imagine how lonely and scared you must have felt. I thought maybe no one would care. Maybe I was alone forever." It was a small gesture, but it made a huge difference to Alina, who had spent days shivering in the cold. As they worked, she asked questions about the town, about John's life, and about the people who lived nearby. John shared stories of his years as a teacher, of students who had come and gone, of the quiet joys of small-town life. Alina listened intently, fascinated by the simplicity and calm of this place compared to the chaos she had just escaped. By midday, Alina had eaten a light meal, and the warmth of the house began to make her feel more human again, less like a frightened stranger lost in the snow. John suggested she rest a little, and she agreed, curling up in the chair with another blanket. He watched her for a moment, then left her to rest while he made some phone calls. He started with local aid organizations, explaining the situation. He was careful to be honest but brief, emphasizing that Alina was in danger and needed temporary shelter and assistance. Most of the calls were discouraging. Shelters were full, resources were limited. But one person offered a small glimmer of hope. There might be a program to help someone in her situation if the proper paperwork could be completed. John hung up and returned to the living room. Alina was awake again, looking slightly more alert. "Did you find anyone who can help?" she asked cautiously. "I might have a lead," John replied. "It will take some work, but we can figure it out together. The important thing is that you're safe right now." Over the next few days, John and Alina formed a routine. Mornings were for warmth and food, afternoons for short walks to stretch her legs and get some sunlight. Even though it was cold, Alina seemed to gain strength from these small steps. John made sure she had everything she needed and tried to give her moments of normalcy: tea, stories, quiet conversation, anything that could make her feel like life was still worth living. During one of their walks, Alina asked about Mr. Thompson. John explained that he had been very ill and that there was little anyone could have done at that point. He avoided blaming anyone directly, focusing instead on what could be done for her now. She nodded slowly, understanding that dwelling on the past wouldn't change anything. John also introduced Alina to a few neighbors discreetly, people he trusted to be kind and understanding. Most were shocked to hear her story, but everyone agreed that she needed care and protection. Slowly, the word spread that someone in the neighborhood needed help, and a small network of quiet support began to form around her. Alina started to open up more about her life back home. She spoke of her family, her childhood, and the dreams she had nurtured for years. John listened patiently, never rushing her or interrupting. He could see that talking about her past, even the painful parts, was helping her heal. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Alina turned to John and said, "I didn't think I would survive the night. I didn't think anyone would care enough to help me. But you saved me. I just saw someone in need and did what anyone should do. You were lucky I was nearby." He had spent most of his life quietly, teaching children, helping where he could, but he had never expected to face a situation like this. And yet, here he was, helping a young woman who had been abandoned and left to face the cold alone. As the week went on, John continued to work on finding a more permanent solution for Alina. He contacted immigration officials, local social workers, and community groups. It was slow, frustrating work, but he refused to give up. He knew that every day she spent with him, safe and warm, was a day closer to recovery and hope. Alina, for her part, began to regain confidence. She helped around the house, cooked small meals, and even started learning simple English phrases to communicate more easily. Each small achievement was a step forward, a reminder that she could survive and thrive despite everything she had endured. The bond between John and Alina grew stronger with each passing day. It wasn't a romantic bond, but something deeper, a bond built on trust, compassion, and shared humanity. They relied on each other in small ways, finding comfort in routines, laughter, and quiet conversation. By the end of the second week, Alina was no longer the frightened, shivering girl John had found in the snow. She had strength again, a sense of self, and hope for the future. And John, who had acted out of instinct and kindness, realized that helping someone in need could transform both lives in unexpected ways. One snowy morning, as they watched the sunrise from the living room window, Alina turned to John and said softly, "I never thought I would see a sunrise again, not like this. Thank you for everything." "You don't have to thank me," he said. "Just promise me you'll keep going no matter what comes next." For Alina, life was beginning again, one step at a time. And for John, he had discovered that sometimes the most ordinary days could hold the most extraordinary moments of compassion and courage. As the days passed, Alina began to regain a sense of normalcy, but the reality of her situation was never far from her mind. Although she had warmth, food, and safety in John's home, she knew this was temporary. She had no legal status, no money, and no family nearby. The challenges she faced were real, and each day brought a mixture of hope and anxiety. John understood this too. He had been trying to find a more permanent solution for Alina, but it wasn't easy. Many doors seemed closed. Shelters were full, government agencies moved slowly, and the bureaucratic process was confusing and frustrating. Each call he made seemed to end with more questions than answers. But John refused to give up. He had promised Alina safety, and he intended to keep that promise no matter how long it took. Alina spent her mornings practicing English, often repeating simple phrases to John, who patiently corrected her mistakes and encouraged her efforts. Slowly, she began to speak more confidently. Even small achievements like ordering food over the phone or speaking to a neighbor brought her pride and a sense of independence. But the difficulties did not disappear. One day, John received a call from a local social worker who expressed concern about Alina's situation. "We need to make sure she has proper documentation," the social worker said. "Otherwise, she cannot stay legally and she might face serious problems." Alina's documents from her home country were outdated, and without them the authorities couldn't help her fully. But John refused to let this discourage him. He knew that Alina's future depended on persistence and careful planning. Meanwhile, Alina faced her own emotional struggles. The trauma of abandonment weighed heavily on her. Some nights she woke in fear, remembering the cold and loneliness she had endured. She felt guilt for relying on John, worrying that she was a burden and shame for being in a foreign country alone. At times, she withdrew into herself, staring quietly out the window, lost in her thoughts. John noticed these moments and approached them with patience. He never forced her to speak, never judged her feelings. Instead, he offered gentle reassurance. "You're not a burden," he said one afternoon as they sat by the fire. "We're in this together. I'm here because I want to help, not because I have to. You saved my life once, and you're still helping me every day." She started helping around the house, cooking small meals, cleaning, and even organizing her few belongings. Each task, no matter how simple, was a step toward reclaiming her life. But the outside world remained uncertain. Neighbors were curious about Alina's presence, and while most were supportive, a few whispered questions and judgmental remarks reached her ears. She tried not to let it bother her, but it was difficult. She felt exposed, a stranger in a small community, and the fear of being sent away haunted her every thought. One morning, John received news that a local legal aid organization might be able to help with Alina's immigration situation. There was a catch. They needed detailed information, documents from her home country, and a record of her current living situation. John and Alina spent hours gathering what little she had, carefully explaining her story and the dangers she had faced. The process was slow and exhausting. Phone calls went unanswered, emails were delayed, and paperwork seemed endless. But with each step, Alina grew more resilient. She realized that the path to stability required patience, persistence, and trust in those who were helping her. And John was there every step of the way, encouraging her, supporting her, and never letting her give up. At the same time, Alina began to explore the town in small, safe ways. John would accompany her on short walks to the nearby park, to the small local market, and even to the library. Each outing was a new challenge. She had to navigate unfamiliar streets, interact with strangers, and face her fear of being alone. But it also gave her confidence. She started recognizing faces, greeting neighbors, and slowly feeling like a part of the community. One afternoon, while walking to the library, Alina admitted something she had been holding inside. "I feel like I've missed so much of life," she said quietly. "Back home, I had dreams, but now I don't know what's left for me." You survived what most people could not. That takes courage and strength, and I believe you'll find a way forward. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about trust, friendship, and the slow rebuilding of a life that had been shattered. They shared meals, stories, and quiet moments by the fire. John taught her simple cooking techniques, and Alina shared stories from her childhood, her culture, and the small joys she had once known. But challenges continued to appear. The legal process remained slow, and the uncertainty weighed heavily on both of them. There were nights when Alina would sit quietly, staring out the window, and John could see the fear returning. "I don't want to go back," she whispered once. "I can't go back, not after everything. We'll do everything in our power to make sure you stay safe here. I promise." Some neighbors brought small gifts of food, offered advice, and expressed concern. Others asked questions, curious but respectful. Slowly, the whispers of suspicion were replaced by quiet support. It was small, but it mattered. Alina began to feel less like an outsider and more like someone who belonged, even in this new, unfamiliar town. One afternoon, John received a call from the legal aid organization. They had reviewed Alina's case, and while there were still hurdles to overcome, they believed there was a possibility for her to stay legally. It would require patience, careful preparation of documents, and her cooperation, but it was a real chance, a ray of hope in what had been a long, difficult journey. When John told Alina the news, she could hardly believe it. "Really?" she asked, her voice trembling with emotion. I might have a chance." For the first time in months, she could see a path forward, not just survival, but life. She could rebuild, grow, and start to heal from the trauma of abandonment and fear. Even as challenges persisted, Alina's confidence grew. She began volunteering small hours at the local library, helping children with reading, something that reminded her of John's stories and her own experiences with kindness. Each act of service, each small success, reinforced her sense of purpose and belonging. And through it all, John remained her anchor. He was patient, understanding, and unwavering in his support. He never judged her for the mistakes or missteps of the past, never rushed her healing, and always reminded her of her strength. By the end of part 3, Alina was no longer just a frightened, abandoned girl. She had become a determined young woman, aware of the challenges ahead but ready to face them with courage and hope. The journey was far from over, but for the first time, she could see a future worth striving for, a future where she had a place, a voice, and a chance to thrive. The snow had melted outside, leaving small puddles and muddy streets, a reminder that winter's harshness was passing. Inside John's home, warmth, safety, and trust had taken root, and for Alina, the world no longer seemed quite so cold and lonely. The first signs of spring were beginning to appear in the small town. The snow had melted, and the sun shone a little warmer each day. Flowers were starting to peek through the earth, and the streets, once icy and treacherous, were now wet with melting snow and puddles. For Alina, the world felt different too. There was hope in the air, a feeling that change was possible, and that life could be more than survival. John had spent the past several weeks working tirelessly to secure a legal path for Alina to remain in the country. There were still challenges, but progress had been made. The legal aid organization had reviewed all of her documents, helped prepare her story, and was confident that her application could succeed. It was still a long process, but now there was a path forward, a real, tangible chance for Alina to build a life without fear of being sent away. Alina herself had changed remarkably. The frightened, shivering girl who had been found in the snow was now strong, alert, and confident. She had learned to navigate the town, communicate with neighbors, and even help others. She spent mornings studying English and afternoons volunteering at the local library, where she assisted children with reading and small projects. Each success, no matter how small, reinforced her sense of independence and belonging. Despite these positive changes, the emotional journey was still ongoing. Alina sometimes thought about her past, the family she had left behind, and the man who had abandoned her. There were nights when sadness crept in, memories of loneliness and fear resurfacing. But John remained her anchor. He offered reassurance, patience, and a listening ear. "It's okay to remember," he would say gently. "But remember this too, you survived, you grew stronger, and you are not alone anymore. I want to contribute, to help others who might be in situations like mine. Even little things can make a difference." The community began to see her not as a stranger, but as someone who genuinely cared, someone who brought kindness and energy into their lives. Meanwhile, the legal process continued. John and Alina attended meetings with social workers, provided additional documents, and patiently answered questions. The process was slow, and there were moments of frustration, but each small victory brought relief and renewed hope. Finally, after weeks of waiting, the news came. Alina's application had been approved. She could remain in the country legally and start building a life without fear of being sent away. When John told Alina, she couldn't hold back tears. "Really?" she asked, her voice trembling with emotion. I can stay." "You saved yourself too," he said. "I just helped you see that you could." Each item reminded her of the journey she had survived and the future she could now create. Even with her newfound independence, Alina and John remained close. They spent weekends together, shared meals, and continued their conversations about life, dreams, and community. John admired Alina's resilience and determination, while Alina cherished John's unwavering support and kindness. Alina also began thinking about her long-term goals. She wanted to continue studying English, improve her skills, and eventually find work where she could help others. The idea of contributing to the community and giving back became her driving motivation. She applied for language classes and local workshops, eager to learn and grow. As she gained confidence, Alina also built new friendships. She connected with neighbors who had once been curious but now offered genuine support and encouragement. She met other immigrants who shared their stories, and through these connections, she began to feel a sense of belonging she had never experienced before. One day, while volunteering at the community center, Alina noticed a young girl struggling with reading. She knelt beside her, patient and encouraging, guiding her through each word. The girl's eyes lit up with understanding and pride. In that moment, Alina realized the full circle of her journey, how she had once been the one in need, and now she could help others find their way. The emotional weight of her past still lingered occasionally, but Alina had learned to face it with strength. She knew she could never forget the pain she had endured, but she had transformed it into empathy, resilience, and determination to make her life meaningful. John watched this transformation with quiet pride. He had never imagined that helping someone in need could lead to such profound change for both of them. Alina's courage, gratitude, and kindness had left a lasting impression on him, reminding him of the power of human connection and compassion. As spring fully arrived, the town itself seemed to mirror Alina's new life. Flowers bloomed in gardens, children played in the streets, and the air was filled with the scent of fresh growth. Alina walked through the town with confidence, greeting neighbors, visiting the library, and attending her classes. She was no longer an outsider. She had become a part of the community, respected and valued. One evening, as the sun set and painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, Alina visited John's home. She brought tea and small pastries, a gesture of gratitude and friendship. They sat together, enjoying the quiet moment, reflecting on the journey they had shared. "Do you remember the first night I arrived?" Alina asked softly, a small smile on her face. John nodded. "How could I forget? You were shivering, scared, and alone. I just did what anyone should have done. You gave me a chance to live, to dream again." She knew that her journey had been difficult, but she also understood that it had shaped her into a stronger, more compassionate person. She had survived the cold, the fear, and the uncertainty, and now she had a chance to thrive. Over the next months, Alina continued to build her new life. She attended classes, volunteered regularly, and began forming meaningful friendships. She found a job at the library, helping with administrative work and organizing community programs. Her days were filled with purpose, her nights with reflection and gratitude. Through it all, John remained a steady presence, offering guidance, support, and companionship. Their bond was unbreakable, a testament to the power of kindness, empathy, and human connection. Alina had been abandoned once, left to face the world alone, but now she had a network of support, a home, and a future to look forward to. One sunny afternoon, as Alina walked through the town square, she felt a sense of peace she had never known. Children ran past her, neighbors waved, and the scent of spring filled the air. She paused for a moment, taking it all in, and realized how far she had come. From the freezing snow and fear of abandonment, she had emerged strong, independent, and full of hope. Returning home, Alina found John tending to his small garden. She approached him with a smile, carrying a small bouquet of flowers she had picked. "For you," she said softly, handing them to him. John accepted the flowers with a warm smile. "Thank you, Alina. They're beautiful." In that moment, the past seemed far away, replaced by the promise of the future. Alina had survived the cold, the fear, and the uncertainty. She had found safety, friendship, and a chance to build a life full of meaning. And she knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, she would face them with courage, hope, and the knowledge that kindness and human connection could change lives forever. The journey had been long and difficult, but the ending was one of hope, resilience, and new beginnings. Alina was no longer a stranger in a cold world. She was a part of a community, a friend, and a person who had overcome incredible odds to create her own future. And John, who had been her guide, mentor, and friend, could take pride in the life they had helped build together. In the end, the harsh winter had passed, both in the world outside and in Alina's life. What began as a shocking moment of fear and abandonment had grown into a story of survival, trust, and the extraordinary power of compassion. Alina's journey was a testament to human resilience, the strength of hope, and the life-changing impact of simple acts of kindness.